Good evening, folks. Welcome to Celtic Fans TV. We're here with our special live stream to talk about all the goings on at Celtic today, of which there were many. I've got Martin with me. We'll be with you for the next half hour or so to go through everything. Martin, plenty to talk about, but first of all, you haven't been on since Brendan Rodgers' return as manager was announced, so I'm sure everybody is keen to get your thoughts on it. How did you feel when the links first came about? Did you think it was going to happen, and how do you feel now that he's here?
So when the link was first announced and how I feel now, very, very similar. I probably go as far back as when he first came to the club, the first time round, and we're talking to a good friend, to Celtic fan, and also had followed the Brendan Rodgers journey at Liverpool, and his opinion was that Brendan Rodgers was as big as it gets in Scottish football, and to get a manager with that experience and the credentials that he carries was a real accolade for the club. And the Celtic fans engrossed in the club. We put ourselves as the biggest and the best football club in the land, and we sometimes get carried away just thinking that we're going to get the biggest and the best managers to come and join us. But it's a difficult ask, isn't it? And there's a lot of names much smaller than Brendan Rodgers that have. I often use the example of Roy Keane. Roy Keane was allegedly interested in joining the club, and he came up and talked to the club and went away, reportedly not interested in what the club had to offer proposition-wise and budget and all these sorts of things. So it's as difficult to attract a top manager as it is to attract a top player to the club, just because of the financial restrictions that exist. So when we got Brendan Rodgers the first time, that feedback from that particular individual and other people's opinions, I got myself really excited. And of course he delivered to a high standard. He didn't let us down. And the whole package was one that was really, really exciting. His professionalism, his persona, the way he managed the media, the football that he played, obviously the Invincible season is one we'll remember forever. The treble after treble after part treble. The only failure potentially was in Europe, with some big defeats, and of course when he left, we were all disappointed. My reaction was quite different to some others, in so much as, kind of understood why I'd gone back to the Premier League, albeit Leicester not one of the bigger clubs. But I wasn't really upset about the whole thing. I was disappointed, but not incredibly upset. I remember the reaction. Paul, you and I did the media reaction after the game at Tynecastle that night, and I certainly was comfortable putting things into context that absolutely disappointed, but I was almost over it as soon as he was away, and more focused on who's going to come in and get us the treble. And then when the rumours came about that he was going to come back, I kind of reflected on what happened post Rodgers. So we thought we were getting Eddie Howe, we got excited by that, and it didn't materialise, and then we wondered if they get another big name, a manager with good experience, maybe somebody else who'd managed in the Premier League. And we probably thought we were entitled to that because that had happened with Brendan Rodgers. But that doesn't happen often, that you get a manager who's still quite young, a lot to offer, who has managed in the Premier League, coming to Scottish football. So Postecoglou came about, and as he said, one of his parting shots was, I was a laughingstock when I arrived, and I thought, well, we get somebody else who the Scottish press, the media, and some of the Celtic fans will consider to be a laughingstock. Well, there'll be another Ange Postecoglou. And of course, that ended up being a fairy tale ending. And that's what I thought we were going to end up with, another Ronnie Deila or Ange Postecoglou. So when Brendan Rodgers' name was cited, I thought, surely we're not going to get somebody of that stature again, be lucky enough to get somebody that big. So I was excited right away. Completely understand the cynicism amongst the Celtic fans and why some were upset by it. But there has been a significant shift in mentality amongst the Celtic fans from that early suggestion that he would come back to the point of actually coming back into where we sit today. And I listened to his press conference, everything that he said since he came back, and I mean, I'm probably even more excited than what I was when I first heard he was potentially going to come back and when he actually joined. He's a manager with, certainly was described by the executive at Celtic as being an outstanding candidate with an outstanding track record. And also the standout candidate. So that tells you that there was others considered, and he was a standout candidate. And you think if there was other candidates who were quite strong, it would be very disrespectful to call him the standout candidate. But clearly he was, and clearly there wasn't many others who were serious contenders that came close to giving us what Brendan Rodgers will give us. So very, very excited to have him back, and I thought, some of the stuff he said what we want to hear. He's here to win. He did talk about the connection that he had with the club, not just on the field but off the field as well. The fact that his family really enjoyed their time in Scotland. He has said, whether we believe it or not, he said he's here for 3 years.
Guaranteed.
Guaranteed, unless he's emptied, which hopefully won't happen. I wouldn't imagine it would happen. And he talks about the club being in a fantastic place. So he appears to be far more settled with regards to where we are and where we're going, versus the same as many, many others, left because he was frustrated that the club couldn't meet his ambition. But many others have done that, Paul. Neil Lennon was one of the ones that left for that very reason. Neil Lennon went to Bolton because he was frustrated that the club couldn't meet his ambition, and he was concerned that he would be embarrassed in Europe. So Brendan Rodgers isn't the first, and he won't be the last to leave the club for that reason. But I'm personally absolutely delighted he's back.
Yeah, I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued to see how it goes, how we start the season. Still feels surreal. I think it will feel surreal the first few games back at Celtic Park, seeing Brendan Rodgers in the dugout. That's for sure. A lot of news coming out of Celtic Park today, Martin. We'll get to the fixtures for next season, which were confirmed as well. But we did get a new signing over the line in Marco Tilio from Melbourne City. Now again, it's the same as usual with these signings. I've only really seen the YouTube clips, but he looks a promising player. Great dribbler, left-sided, Australian, and the last one we had like that wasn't he too bad, was he?
No, he was not. He sometimes, sometimes get a player in. You think, I wonder if that means a player's moving on. The club that are aware that there's something going on in the background. That's not always the case. I'm not going to dare suggest that he's a ready-made replacement for Jota. I know we'll come to him should he leave, but he does bring an awful lot of what Jota brought and ended up being. So first thing, probably fair to call out that he's at the very early stages of his career. He's a very young lad, 21-year-old. But he's played at international level, so obviously really, really well thought of. When you watch some of his videos, that's probably where the Jota comparison comes from, because he's very, very comfortable on the ball. He's a flair player. He's got great vision, great composure, lots and lots of confidence. He's unpredictable as well. So absolutely his favoured foot's his left foot, but he's comfortable on the left side of the pitch and the right side of the pitch. He loves to beat a player, and you don't always get that. Even in Scottish football, you don't always get that. Somebody who wants the ball and wants to go and beat a player. Your Paddy Roberts type. But you could probably, in the last 10 years, you could count on one hand the number of players that, even Celtic being the best team in Scotland, the number of players that we've managed to attract that they want to go and beat a player. Don't just want to collect the ball and then play the simple pass, or sometimes the ambitious pass. They want to take players on. So excited to see him do that. He plays good cross-field passes as well. So he can pick a good pass out. He's got great pace, very, very technically gifted. Uses both feet, as we've said, although, as you highlighted, his left foot's his favoured foot. But he's a crowd pleaser, Paul, so I anticipate Celtic fans will really warm to us, and he'll get us off our seats. So just to reiterate, he's not won World Cups, he's not highly experienced, he's not scored barrel loads of goals because he's at the very early stage of his career, but he looks like he's got that raw talent, and I'm really, really excited to see what he can bring to the team.
He does look like he's got that potential, and this is something I covered last week. I think Brendan Rodgers, with young players particularly, can really help them in terms of his one-on-one coaching and development of young players, and I think that's something that can help somebody like Tilio as well. I don't think he's a replacement for Jota in any way. We're going to come and talk about Jota next up, but I think he's maybe more. He's obviously got potential. Does he play from the right-hand side? I know he can play in the 10 as well. But I think we just needed some more out wide, because there's speculation about Abada. Where's James Forrest at in terms of his contribution at this stage of his career? I know we've got his testimonial in a couple of months' time as well. So I think we do need more options out wide, and I think he'll certainly give us that. The confirmation of the signing comes off the back of yesterday's reports, though, Martin, that Jota's on the brink of a £20 million move to Saudi Arabia. They're only paying him £10 million a year tax-free. so I can't think why he'd be attracted to that. But it comes as a surprise, doesn't it? Because I think Jota, only having been here one season permanently, signed a 5-year contract last summer. He's one that you probably thought we could at least get another year out of. But again, as with Ange Postecoglou, it appears that 2 years is becoming the maximum to keep your top performers and your excellent managers.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is becoming a trend, and it's going to become more common than ever. And it's primarily because of the gap between what we can pay and what some of these other clubs, particularly down south, but also in some of these leagues, like the Saudi league, what they can pay. The gap's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and I'm sure it'll continue to get bigger. So therefore, it's naturally going to become harder to keep these players when they're chasing the money, and understandably so. Whilst they're well paid, is there a limit to what people would like to earn? They want to be financially secure, but maybe want their kids and their grandkids and all the rest to be financially secure as well. So you can understand it. I think for a lot of players, I mean, there is the occasional one that will sit tight, and it's not just captains, but two good examples would be Scott Brown, who could have gone down south quite easily and performed at a high level down there, and Callum McGregor being another example. Obviously, our last two captains, but every now and again, there's players who are comfortable in their home environment, maybe thinking about family and Scott Brown's case, maybe kids, for example, and other factors. But it's happening less and less often. That James Forrest is another example of players that could go down and play at a high level but choose to stay at the club. And a lot of those examples I've just given you are Scottish players. It's probably more difficult to retain the services of a top talent if they're from another country. Although Henrik Larsson is a good example of somebody who could have disappeared, and again, because his family were comfortable in Scotland and he fell in love with the club, he chose to stay with us. And as soon as he decided he was going to go elsewhere, off he goes to Barcelona. He could have done that 2 or 3 years earlier if he so chose. So every now and again, Paul, there's an exception to that, but it's becoming a really, really common trend. I did personally think with Jota, my primary concern over attrition's been around Hatate. And maybe Kyogo, the big question was, is Kyogo good enough to replace Harry Kane or to go down and play alongside him, or would he sit on the bench? If you're Kyogo, you're going to get game time. Are you actually good enough? Hatate, I think a lot of people felt it's a completely different role, playing in the middle as opposed to playing as a striker and expected to get 30 goals in the Premier League. But could Hatate go down and play in the Premier League, for example? So I was concerned about those two. Comfortable that I thought CCV, having done a lot of travelling about and tried lots of different clubs, would settle now that he's getting a regular game and performing well. But Jota was probably the one that people would say would be next on the list out the potential leavers. He'd probably that fourth one. My personal view on Jota was he's still young enough to hang about for another year. It felt like currently at this stage of his career at Celtic was probably his level. There was a period last year where there was a little bit of inconsistency and he wasn't necessarily starting in games, but he did finish the season on a high. He did score a lot of big goals as well, particularly in those games against Rangers. So almost thrived on the pressure of playing in big games. I thought he performed reasonably well in Europe as well. So no doubt in his core ability. I just felt another year at Celtic playing in the Champions League would have done him more harm, would have helped his career and would have added some value. But for Celtic and for Jota, it feels like an absolute no-brainer, this particular deal. And if some of the reported transfer fees are accurate, then it's going to be absolutely brilliant for us, and of course for Jota and his income as well. So,
well, that was my next question to you. Actually, I wanted to ask and to get people's feel in the comments as well. Let us know in the comments in the live chat what you think of it in terms of how good the deal is for Celtic, because we owe Benfica 30%. Seems a bit of contention about whether it's 30% of the fee or 30% of the profit. But if it is to be £20 million, I know 25 has been muted, and €23 million as well, which basically is £20 million. But for Jota, with 4 years in his contract, do you feel that's a good deal? £20 million?
I think unquestionably £20 million are, considering what we paid, was it £6.5 million or
yeah.
six? Yeah. I think to get that profit over that period of time is spectacular. And again, we will see it more and more and more as the money just gets more crazy across the world. But certainly for a Scottish team to make that amount of money in that period of time is sensational. And the 30% hurts, whether it's 30% profit or 30% of the overall value. It doesn't make a huge. It will make a couple of million a difference, won't it? 30% of the six. But in the bigger scheme of things, it's a huge amount of money. You think what some of the other big players have gone for in recent years. I think it's a no-brainer for the club. If we're going to get 25 million, then it would be a good return for us. But the challenge for the club is to continue to find Abadas and Jotas and Kyogos and these types of players. Because for every Jota that you bring in, there's a risk you bring in another 2 or 3 that don't feature and they're not a success. So, I know you've said Tilio's not a direct replacement for him, but regardless of whether he plays his exact position or not, can he come in and be a big success and the club get a return on him, or potentially him hang about for a bit longer, 3-4 years would be better for the club to then get a return thereafter. But I think it's one of those, Paul, that you just have to say, well done to the club for finding him, well done to Jota for having such a great, couple of years, year on loan and then a year permanent, and best wishes in your new role. But we'll all be absolutely gutted to lose him, that's for sure.
Aye, absolutely. It was a joy to watch at times. And by the way, he's obviously not confirmed yet, but it does seem to be gathering a pace. I think at 20 million quid, if it is that, he'd be our second highest sale of all time behind Kieran Tierney. And I said this yesterday. I think 20 million quid would get you most players in the Celtic team. I just don't think unless the club are aware that there could be a bidding war for somebody, that they could turn that down.
Yeah. No, I suppose we've got one a 5-year contract, so Brendan Rodgers might say, well, I think we'll get 20 million next year or the year after as well, because I think I'll develop as a player and I'll become an even bigger asset. That's a quandary, isn't it? But the risk is he hangs about for the next couple of years, he picks up a couple of injuries, he doesn't perform particularly well for whatever reason, he might be unsettled, might want away and go in the huff, that type of thing. So that's going to be the ongoing quandary for the club. Do you do an Ange Postecoglou and as soon as somebody wants to leave, you open the door for them? Or do you do an old Brendan Rodgers and say, Dembele and Boyata, and you're going absolutely nowhere. I'm going to stop you leaving. It's somewhere in between that, in my opinion. I just thought Jota was settled. He spent most of his nights down the Gallagate buying Rebel CDs and stuff, and you think he's just appeared to love the city and love the club, and there's a real bond between him and the fans, and even things like the way he celebrated his goals and stuff. I genuinely, there was something not quite right at the final though. It looked a little bit like it was a farewell at the final. So I think you commented on it, Paul, before. I just had a gut feeling that he was probably our 4th biggest risk with regards to leaving, and probably not because Jota was trying to engineer a leave, but just because I thought there would be interest, and depending on where the interest came from, similar to Ange Postecoglou, someone commented along the lines of, the first big club, or first club that comes along and disappears. There was a lot of interest in Ange from smaller clubs, and he wasn't interested. So my view on Jota was very much depends on, is it a huge club that comes in for him, or is it money that he can't refuse? And sadly, the Saudi deals are a really financially strong deal for Jota, and one that I'm sure he'll struggle to knock back. I mean, a big thing for him, aside from the money, he's trying to get into that Portugal squad as well. Throughout his career, he's managed to feature in all the Portuguese squads, under 16s, under 17s, under 18s, under 21, and done quite well as well. He's been scoring goals for his country, so I'm sure he'll. And that particular Portuguese team that he's featured in have been successful, reached finals and won tournaments. So he'll have the hunger and desire to get into that Portugal first team, and whether the Saudi move helps him do that or not, he's out of Europe, but I'm sure he's considered that as well, and Celtic won't guarantee that, but playing the Champions League might have helped him. But certainly a sore one for us, and if he does move on, we've got to hope that Brendan Rodgers very quickly brings in some big players that will excite the fans as well.
I think the money, given the financial situation that we're in just now anyway, but the sale of a big asset like Jota should bolster the transfer budget, if it's not big enough already for Brendan Rodgers. But I think this is the way it has to work, isn't it? This is the model that we want to have. We don't like losing players that we get attached to, players that we enjoy watching. But as you touched on there, it could lose form, he could pick up an injury, and before you know it, he might be seen out of his contract, and you lose him for nothing. That's something that Rangers have really failed on, in terms of thinking they had big assets and then not being able to sell them and losing them for nothing. So I think if this model is to work, this is what we have to get used to, and I think it's a good deal for the club. I really do. Before we get to the fixtures, Martin, we did lose an Aussie today. Aaron Mooy retired at the age of 32. I think the injury problems towards the end of the season, I think there's a wee bit more to them than we first thought. It's a relatively early retirement, but I thought he was excellent for us this season. And I think it's great. It's a great way to finish a football career, in it, to win a domestic treble and go out on a high.
I mean, he really, really was a fan favourite, despite the fact he didn't play an awful lot. The fans just fell in love with him, and we've talked about this before. You know, the song that they sang, and I know the song's been sung about other players, etc. It's just one of those catchy songs. But you don't sing any song about any player unless you're either mocking them and you're talking about Effie Ambrose winning the Ballon d'Or, or you genuinely love them. And there was a lot of love for Aaron Mooy in the Celtic end, you know, home and away. I mean, he had a lot of big performances for us as well. Scored a lot of good goals. He was taking penalties for us, and just one of those players that you really warm to. So I wouldn't say I was gutted in the way I'm gutted about the potential Jota departure, but still saddened to hear that he was retiring. And of course, he wouldn't be retiring unless it was because he had to. Had another year left in his contract, and you know, why wouldn't you hang about for that other year at 32? You would hope you still have 2 or 3 years left in the tank. But you know, he certainly, despite not having a lot of game time, he can certainly look back in his short time at Celtic with a smile on his face, and Celtic fans, I'm sure, will all wish him well in whatever he goes on to do, you know, next in his career. But a sad day to hear that he was retiring.
And interesting, because it opens up another spot in that midfield, and I think one of the most interesting things is we might have a different looking squad, more so than we thought come the start of the season. If we are to lose someone as key as Jota, Mooy is to go as well, and who knows how the transfer window might play out over the next month or so. And you'd think Brendan Rodgers want to bring in some of his own players as well, and put his stamp on the squad. But he was keen to point out in the media conference we did with him that he doesn't need to change an awful lot, and he'll just tweak things as he goes, because it's such a successful team that has a structure and has a way of playing that really works for them. The fixtures were announced today. Martin, we start at home to Ross County, Flag Day. What did you make of those opening 5 fixtures that we start the season with?
So the opening 5, the way I've looked at it, rightly or wrongly, is so some fans will have a view on, you know, those bogey fixtures, and we've been so successful in the last few years that we've very rarely lost games. But obviously, a draw is nearly as bad as a defeat. You know, with the way that Celtic and to some extent Rangers perform in recent times, and part of that's been there hasn't been a lot of strength out with those two clubs. But you know, it used to be that you drop points every sort of 4th game. That was kind of the way it was as I was growing up throughout the years. But you know, now you're lucky if you drop points 1 every sort of 7 or 8 games. So there are some teams in there. You know, for a period of time it was Livingston. St Mirren have performed at a decent level, and they've been a team that have certainly been a bit of an Achilles heel for us. But if you were to look at it very, very simplistically and say, right, where did the teams finish last year, and who are the teams that you consider to be the best over a lengthy period of time out the current teams in the league? So you would have to say Rangers, Hibs, Hearts and Aberdeen would be the 4 that you would pick out. So the way I've looked at the fixtures, Paul, is so Hibs and Hearts and Aberdeen home and away. Rangers, no, not home and away. Hibs, Hearts and Aberdeen away from home, because at home they're nowhere near as daunting, but away from home they're really, really tricky, those fixtures. And then the Rangers games home and away, you know, they are a challenge. Let's not kid ourselves on.
Yeah.
So if on the assumption that you play those teams 4 times, that they'll make the top 6, that then gives you 10 really tough games, right? 4 against Rangers and 2 against Hearts, Hibs and Aberdeen. And the way the fixtures have come out, you may remember last year we had an easier start to the season, which meant that come the split, we're going to have a really, really tough run of away games, and that is how it worked out. It's the reverse this year, right? So out of those 10 tricky fixtures that I've talked about in the first 10 games in the league, there are 4 of those. So that's Aberdeen away very early on, Rangers away, Hearts away, and Hibs away. So 4 out of those first 10 games. And then we'll have a run of 10 games where there's none of those matches, none of those 10 that I've talked about that are the toughest 10 games in a league campaign. And then we finish at the end of the year with Rangers at home and then St Mirren away, so a couple of challenging fixtures. And then we come back after the year, and out the next batch of 10 games there's a further 4. So that middle bit that we've got out of the three runs of 10 is the easiest. We start with a difficult run of games, and then after we come back after winter break, there's a further 4 out of those 10 that are challenging. The good news is we then go into the split with potentially, and I know it's never this straightforward, right? But on paper, Rangers at home, Hearts at home, Aberdeen at home, and Hibs at home. So I'm quite happy. I'm quite happy with that. I suppose a lot will very much depend on how settled is our squad. You know, God forbid that we were to go and lose Satati, Kyogo, Carter Vickers, you know, the spine of the team, and then have to bring in a lot of players, and it would take those players a bit of time to get used to each other. I'm hoping that the attrition will be very moderate, and that we'll bring in some big players that'll be able to hit the ground running, you know, straight away. And the Aberdeen away and Rangers away, and those first 4 games won't be as daunting as it would be otherwise. And we get off to a strong start, and then we settle into that middle part of the season, where we've got lots and lots of fixtures, and we've got Champions League happening and all that stuff. Because for the first few weeks, there's only Saturday games, there's no midweek games. So again, that's a blessing. But we will have to come back from the winter break, and we have done in the last couple of years, come back from the winter break and get stuck into the challenges that come there, which is Aberdeen away again, and then Hibs away, game 2 and game 3, and then we get Rangers away just before the split. So I'm quite pleased overall. Looked at a number of other things. You know, who do you play midweek? I sometimes think in the league, sometimes our performances can dip during the week. I don't know what it is, but sometimes that happens. Our midweek games, it doesn't look like we're having to travel anywhere too far, although we might have to for the Ross County away game, because that clashes with the semi-final of the League Cup. So that would get rearranged, as would the Hearts game at home if we reach the final. Also had a wee look at Champions League games to see, because sometimes you can see a dip in performance after a Champions League game. So we've got Livingston away.
A graphic for that one.
Oh, you got that one, have you? As you've said there, Livingston away. It was a tie that we struggled with for a number of years, and then we've overcome that barrier now, and it's become a fixture the last 2 or 3 times we've done well in. But then Kilmarnock at home, Hibs away, not the easiest, Aberdeen at home, St Johnstone away, and Hearts at home. So yeah, it could be tougher than that. Certainly the home games you're happy with. So really looking at Livy, Hibs and St Johnstone. Absolutely no guarantees against any of those teams. But it could have been tougher than those fixtures, Paul. So overall really pleased. There is a wee risk in social media. A lot of the fans have been saying, you know, Rangers have got a much easier start than we have, and that's factually correct. But it was the opposite last year. So
it always alternates, doesn't it? It's like it's the same way as you get the first derby and the last derby at home. It always alternates every year in terms of a tough start and a supposedly easier start. The thing that jumps out for me, Martin, is that Hibs game there. You've talked about those games against Hibs and Hearts away. We've got Tynecastle and Easter Road back to back, 1 week after the other, and a Champions League game sandwiched in between. So that should be a tough week if we end up away from home in the Champions League, and we've got Tynecastle and Easter Road either side of it. Given that those are 2 of our toughest away games of the season.
Yeah, I mean that is a really tough year on. The Hearts away game comes after an international break. That could be a bad thing for us if we've got loads of players away playing. So Scotland are, I'm not sure if it's more than just Spain away, but certainly Spain away is in that period. So, the Scottish players that are representing their country from Celtic will come back a wee bit tired after that one. It's going to be a tough game, isn't it? Spain away. Mm-hmm. So for Cam McGregor, you've got Spain away, then Hearts away, then Barcelona away, and then Hibs away. So for him and others, that's a tough wee run. But that is it's a tough. And then we get Ross County, well, League Cup semi-final. I think it goes St Mirren home, then League Cup semi-final, then back into the Champions League. So a great wee run of games in there if you're a supporter. But for the players, it'll be a big ask. But that's where we need to get a squad. And one of the interesting things with Rodgers, we talk about potential attrition and players, some of your top players maybe wanting away, but some of those players who maybe haven't managed, because Ange certainly had a favoured 11, and he would ordinarily start that 11, and then he would bring on his next three best players around about the 60-minute mark, and you could you do predictions, Paul, and track it closer than I do, but that's how I felt as a fan, that he sort of had that 14-15 that he would utilise the most. So those periphery players that weren't getting a game too often, they're maybe thinking, I'm not going to hang about too much longer if I'm not getting a game. And one of the obvious examples would be the likes of Abada, but there'll be others in there as well. So those players might be thinking that I'll hang about now. Players like Seagrass and some others might be thinking that I've got a second chance here. So we might get a bit of player retention from some of the squad players who we consider and Brendan Rodgers considers to be good enough to break into that first team.
Yeah, lots to look forward to. Before we go, any quick fire questions for the comments? Martin, everybody's talking in the live chat here about a potential return for Kieran Tierney on loan. I just can't see it for the life of me. But if 4 weeks ago I'd have sat here and say I couldn't see Brendan Rodgers returning for the life of me either, so I don't think that means very much. Just with Tierney, I don't think it'd be the right move either. He's on an absolute fortune at Arsenal, obviously, and I think expensive loan moves for players from England, that's kind of what we're trying to move away from, innit? We're trying to get young players at good value that can come and perform, and then we can sell them for profit. I don't know if burning a lot of money on an expensive loan deal, despite the fact it's Kieran Tierney, would be worth it.
It came up on our chat, didn't it, Paul, on the Celtic Fans TV WhatsApp chat in the last week or two, and I did see your comments. I'm not sure I commented on it, but I seen your comments where you weren't terribly keen, and I just remember reading it at the time thinking, I'm the polar opposite. I would be absolutely over the moon, and there's a lot of fans that absolutely love him. There was some fans went off when he left in the same way that he did when Rodgers left as well, but I can't remember who it was. I think it was Neil Lennon that said Tierney left really, really confused. And I think the issue is when these deals happen, there are so many parties that they make the deal happen, that Kieran Tierney, Jota, Brendan Rodgers, Peter Lowell, all these guys are massive influencers in these deals, but they are one of 5 or 6 people in parties that are involved. So how much say did Kieran Tierney have in his move? How much did the club influence that move, or his agent, or Arsenal push for it and push the boat out? I think the quandary for Kieran Tierney is he went down there and the league and all the pundits fell in love with him. All they were talking about was Tierney, and I don't think anybody's seen it coming that he would end up where he's ended up with very, very limited game time, and he must be frustrated to death because all he wants to do is play. He's just one of those guys that just loves the game, and I'm sure he'll be absolutely gutted about he disappeared, and the club that he's been at since he was a young boy, 7-year-old, didn't win 10 in a row, and obviously he's a big fan. He generally goes on his holiday and sits in Irish boozers and sings Celtic songs and that. Like, genuinely does. He's a fan. And a lot of people say they're fans, but are they really? He's just a lovely person as well. I've got a friend of mine who helped arrange a golf trip for him recently in Gullin, and he was absolutely brilliant with this particular guy's kids and stuff, and brought them gifts and everything, and spent ages in their company, way above and beyond what you'd expect of anybody. And there's just no airs and graces with him. He's just a lovely guy. So, I think Kieran Tierney went down there. Of course, he was partly attracted to the money. I think he also went down there because it suited the club. and the club were negotiating that deal and quite keen to make it happen. So that's the bit when I'm talking about Tierney's walking down the Celtic way, turning his head back, and yes, jumping into the fancy car and going down to live in London, all that stuff. But it hasn't worked out, and it hasn't been that glamour move. And you hear lots of players saying when you leave Celtic, you regret leaving Celtic, whether you're a manager, Brendan Rodgers, whether you're a player. There's a lot of players say, actually, I didn't realise how good it was until I moved on. And when you're a Celtic fan and you've been brought up in the club, I think you probably feel it more than most. So I wouldn't be shocked. I think it very much depends what else is on the table. There was chat about Newcastle being interested in him. Would he go into Newcastle and get first team football? There's that whole thing around, do you go from a top club, top six club into another top six club? And if you do, are you going to be on their bench rather than Arsenal's bench? Or do you go down into the middle part of the league and you go and play for a Bournemouth, a Brighton, an Everton, that type of thing, and not win trophies, right? But go and still play in the Premier League. So what is it Kieran Tierney wants? Does he want the money and play in the Premier League but not be winning trophies? Or does he want to be playing at the top level and winning trophies? I mean, there was chat for a period that he was going to Spain. Now, how true those rumours were, but he was that well thought of that he was going to get that big move to Real Madrid or a Barcelona type thing. Now, as I say, how true those rumours were, we don't know, but there were certainly rumours about that. That's where he was. So does he want to stay, or does he want to go to an Everton, be a standout player, and then get his big move to Man United or whatever else, and then see where it takes him? Or does he want to come back for the next couple of years? He's still young enough to come back to Scotland for a couple of years and then see where that takes him and get his big move back into the Premier League in due course. The relationship here with Brendan Rodgers undoubtedly will be a factor here. Rodgers will be trying to encourage him to come back, and on the assumption that was a really strong relationship, Rodgers will have an influence on him. It's just whether there are other options available to him that are, too good to refuse. Newcastle, for example, and Eddie Howe saying, "Look, you are my number one. You're going to feature week in, week out, or you're going to come in and be a squad player." Because as much as a lot of Celtic fans talk about John McGinn, the rumours were that when John McGinn was interested in Celtic, and he was genuinely interested in Celtic, that Brendan Rodgers didn't give him any assurances about first team football, and the board got blamed for that. And maybe, I mean, who knows? You don't know, and I don't know, Paul. You read stories and listen to things that people tell you, but the rumours were that John McGinn wasn't given any assurances about first team football. And will Kieran Tierney get assurances about first team football at one of these top clubs or not? And if the answer to that question is no, then you play in the middle of that league and get first team football, or you come back to your boyhood heroes and be part of playing Champions League football and everything that comes with playing for Celtic. So I would be super excited to see him back. And I know he's injury prone, right? But he puts his heart and soul on the pitch, and he's one of the best that we've seen for a long time in a Celtic jersey. So it'd be like winning the lottery, getting Kieran Tierney back.
Aye, we'll keep an eye on that one. Don't know how much there is to it, but I think a loan deal would be the absolute max that we could stretch to. Right, that's it, folks, for this live stream. Thank you for joining us, for being with us throughout. Like this video, comment with your own thoughts below. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll be back with more content to more Celtic news in the weeks to come. Thank you.